Now let's dive right into the panel discussion on the cold emailing trends in 2024. What's hot and what's not? And I'd like to introduce our expert speakers, Ashleigh Early, CEO at the other side of sales consulting, Callum Henderson, CRO at EngageTech, Michael Benson, founder and CEO at Mailreef. Hi, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Glad to be here.
Cool. So let's kick off with the first question. What new trends you are seeing in cold emailing in 2024, and what is there anything that stays the same? Ashleigh, mic to you.
I appreciate letting ladies go first. I'll say honestly, they're more staying the same than changing. Good content, well-written, well-targeted emails will always win. Doesn't matter, deliverability, all the other concerns I know we've got, good content will always do better. So if you're focusing on leveling up your content, you'll figure it out. And I'm sure there's a lot of things my colleagues and I will talk about, like little tweaks around deliverability and stuff like that. You have to be a little more aware of that than I think you needed to be 18 months ago. But other than that, just basically, I'm having a lot more and more conversations these days. People are like, oh, AI is coming and using bots for this. I'm like, okay, yes, those are coming. Those are making a lot of things more interesting and some things a lot easier. But we still need humans to create that human connection to write good content, period. So focusing on that, the rest will figure itself out. So back to basics is my
Thank you, Ashleigh. Callum, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ashleigh shared some really important stuff there. I always try and look to my own email inbox as maybe a bit of a guide as to what's going on, and I think copywriting is key. The number of emails that I personally receive that are quickly put to the side are ones where it just doesn't feel like the person knows me as a buyer and has taken the time to try and know me. And I'm not necessarily saying that I expect to be the only person that they're emailing, but the emails that stand out and the remain the same trend really needs to be that the copy is targeted and intelligent. And I think that's a really important part. And I haven't necessarily yet seen the new trends of AI and automation and scaling quite meeting the quality that the best copywriters and the people that are really, really good at email marketing, which, just to be clear, I don't put myself in that category. But there are, I think that copy is key.
Great, thank you so much. Michael, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'll continue on the trend here. So, on Mailreef side of things, to give a background, so we send 100 million cold emails a month from our infrastructure. So we're competing with Google and Microsoft and deliverability side of things. So most of my answers will be on the deliverability side of things. So everybody tries to find some sort of edge to get more emails in the inbox specifically, and kind of going to my colleagues' points that basically good copy outbeats any kind of good email deliverability infrastructure that you have, no matter how big or how small it is. So, over the last 3 to 6 months, we have seen trends where if you're not really personalizing things, specifically on kind of opening emails and even Spintaxing, your campaigns will start out great and they'll slowly kind of fade down. So, specifically as it relates to delivering to Google, Microsoft's a little bit easier to deliver to, but specifically to Google, we're seeing that systems are now picking up emails that are your standard templates. So, the major trend over the last 6 months that we've seen is just changing up first name, just changing up a company name is not really getting it done anymore. You really got to hone in. You really got to mention case studies. You really actually have to hone in your audience and actually know what you're saying to those people to kind of get that hook and get them to reply and engage in your email.
Great point. We'll talk about email deliverability during this panel discussion, obviously, because that's the hottest topic, I think, for 2024, among also with AI personalization and stuff like that, AI things. The next question will be for what's the biggest mistake people make when sending cold emails, and have you noticed any new mistakes? Let's start with Callum that time.
Yeah, I was trying to think of something on this that I feel is really, really actionable for someone to make an adjustment around. And it's reflected in perhaps some of my own mistakes early on in looking at email as a channel to engage buyers. A lot of what we do as an organization is quite focused on cold calling. We do appointment setting, and one of the things that we're talking about to our reps is to talk about a big ask, which is when you get a buyer, try and get a meeting with them. Try and close for that. And I think the mistake that I see people make on email is trying to take what happens on a call and reflect that in the ask in an email. And I think that making the call to action something much smaller in email is a better way to go. For example, can I follow up with something a little bit more? For example, are you open to me sending a video as a follow up to this, or open to learning more, rather than do you want to give up 30 minutes? And I think, yeah, the mistake I'm going a long way around calling out is that the asks are often too big.
Great point. Ashleigh, what about you?
I love that. Actually, very similar. I was going to say, I think a lot of people get confused on the purpose of a cold email. They think the purpose of a cold email is to book meetings. It's not. That's a happy side effect. The purpose of a cold email is to get a response. You just want to get a response. If that response is, yes, I'll take a meeting, fantastic. You skipped a couple steps. Very, very few people are going to be willing to give their most valuable commodity, their time, to a stranger off of a couple sentences. So if that's your metric for success, you're kind of screwed. Instead, focus on just trying to get a response. Is this interesting? Is this relevant? Are you the right person to speak with? Would you like some more information? Just get them to engage. And then once they engage, then you build the trust. It takes 1 or 2 more email exchanges. Then you've got the meeting. But now you've got a meeting with someone who's truly engaged and ready to enter the buying process, versus someone who is saying no to a meeting right now because they didn't actually read your email. So that's another thing I'll say too, is going for interest, going for a response. Also is a bit of a pattern interrupt. Again, I love, Callum, you mentioned using your own inbox as a bit of a bellwether for what's going on. I do the same thing. 80% of the cold emails I get are saying, hey, can I get 30 minutes of your time? My answer is no, I don't know you. So unless you make a really good argument initially, I'm not going to give a stranger my time. But I will tell someone, yeah, send me some more information. Hey, I'm curious about this. Hey, let me do a little bit more, and then say yes to 30 more minutes. So that's a big thing for me, I think, is make sure you know what your goal is. Your goal is to get a response and then shape that response into a meeting. If you do that, you'll get far more people engaging, far more people responding. Will some of them not take a meeting? Absolutely. But you will end up with more total meetings than if you just go and ask for a meeting right off the bat.
That's actually a great point. I would like to add my 5 cents here, because one of the greatest follow-ups that I got was a follow-up from an agency. And the whole idea was to actually send me some industry updates, some Google latest, stuff that they just rolled out for everyone, and stuff like some recent SEO things that I need to consider for my SEO strategy. So it was so helpful. And they were like, okay, so we are here to help. We are, just let us know. We are able to pick it up from any point. And I really like that. It was really helpful. So I got value before we even start to collaborate.
Yeah, if I can give you a fun analogy, I tell people all the time, whether it's cold calling or emailing, I tell them, imagine you're going to a bank and you're opening up an account. You go to a bank, you open up an account. The bank isn't going to give you $5,000. You have to put $5,000 in first. Building relationships with prospects is the same way. You have to give them some value before you make the ask of, hey, can I get some time? So industry reports, even if it's not from your company, anything like that. Hey, here's why I thought this would be interesting. Don't just say, hey, here's a report from Gartner. Hey, here's a report from Gartner. Check out page 5. I think you'll like the 4th paragraph. Can be a really great way, no holds barred, just to add some value, make that deposit so that you can get a return later.
Agree entirely. Michael, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, that awesome points all around. I think one thing to note as well is a lot of people send almost too many follow-ups. So, as it relates to deliverability, typically if you get the first email in the inbox, maybe even the second one, as you get kind of towards the third or fourth, even with these awesome kind of tidbits of industry information, it's very likely those kind of follow-ups are going to go to spam. So if you are sending a lot of follow-ups, try to space it out over a longer period of time and try to build that relationship. And if you can even in your sequences almost time it with almost industry relevant timing. So, we actually generally say to send one initial email, one hyper targeted follow-up email that actually adds value, and then maybe a third, these kind of 4th through 7th follow-ups of, hey, just bumping this up in your inbox, or did you see this? Like, let me know either way, or, the 1, 2, 3, let me know your option. A lot of these tactics that did work a long time ago just don't work now, and over time it actually hurts your kind of initial emails to other prospects. So we always say, really hone in on kind of that first initial follow-up that's relevant to that first initial, and then try to recycle them later if you can't actually get them on kind of those first initial hooks. Don't necessarily send 7 follow-up emails. In sales in general, they always say there's between like 8 and 12 follow-ups lead to a meeting or a sale. Yes, that is true, but try to layer on multiple channels. That's why reply is one of the better tools out there in the market, specifically to hit in multiple areas, not just on cold email. So
is what you're saying there that there is some part of the those kinds of follow-ups that just aren't landing with buyers now, which means they're more likely to mark you as spam, which means that the
exactly.
net new emails you send in future, like there's a degradation there.
Yeah, exactly. So, as it relates to Google or Microsoft or even, custom kind of spam filters, right? That initial email, if you have a clean infrastructure and an amazing kind of customized email, that's going to generally get in the inbox. But if that person barely interacts with that email, barely replies to that email, and also other emails connected to that network, you have to remember, as it relates to deliverability, when you're sending an email, it's not just that one box to that one person, it's an entire network as a whole. So if you're just kind of peppering in more emails and it's basically going into the abyss and those prospects aren't totally following up, there's a balance between trying to understand, trying to save your deliverability on these mailboxes that you spent so much time setting up and nurturing, on the flip side of getting those replies. So there is a balance. So yes, you still might get positive replies on a 5th or 6th email. And there is data to prove that. You really do want to try to say, okay, what's that balance between deliverability and actually kind of getting positive replies? And, you also have to remember, if you're just kind of spewing a bunch of just generic follow-up emails, a lot of them are just going to just really hurt deliverability and not really kind of get you over that hump.
Can I ask a follow-up here too?
Sure.
Sure.
Because we're dealing with the same thing. And it's interesting because I've noticed with a lot of my clients I've been working with recently that their reply rates kind of do almost an inverted bell curve.
Yep.
Really good at the top, and then they kind of drop them on, and they get great again at the end. But our theory has always been that's happening. And I'm seeing this across, I don't know, I probably looked at 4 or 5 at least in the past month, I've looked at, I think 10 different outreach gong sales loft instances across a bunch of different clients, from 2 people to 50 people.
Right.
And pretty much all of them have that inverted bell curve. But what our theory has always been, the issue in the middle is might be some deliverability stuff, but we've also been noticing, especially now we're into summer, the impact of people being out of office. Because if you send that great meeting, you send that great, initial thing to someone, it's July. Don't send anything to anyone in France. They are not answering right now.
That's right.
Right? But even in other parts of the world, people go out of office for a week or 2 at a time pretty regularly. So you have to make sure you spread these out long enough. So the context behind the question is, what are you seeing in the data is like the optimum length of time for those maybe 4 or 5 touches layered in with LinkedIn and phone and whatever else?
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, you also have to remember everybody is checking their email. So even that initial email, if people aren't following up or like not getting back to you, they still have seen, oh, it's Mike at Mailreef. Like it's in the back of your mind. And so, yeah, that bell curve you're talking about, we see it as well. We ultimately tell clients almost like, we really mainly look at it as a deliverability thing. So kind of in that abyss of what you're talking about on the bottom, you're really affecting your mailboxes. So, on that tail end, it's like, it's a matter of if you can almost survive that middle, then you can like keep going on that back end. But the having a proper spacing is good too. So if you're always layering on initials and getting that positive feedback loop while also managing follow-ups on the back end and kind of that abyss, you can kind of keep going. So, typically what we'll see is, an initial follow-up maybe like 3 days later, but then like, even for our campaigns, like we'll actually kind of circle back 4 months later, and it's mostly to actually preserve deliverability. But at the same time, they're like, oh yeah, like this person has already been on my radar. I thought about this for the most part. So, and I would also even look at the data on those kind of tail end where they go back up. It's like, what was different between that end and that middle, because ultimately, it might just be this time of year around summer, but if that's helpful.
Thank you so much for your questions. I think that's the right time to dive into email deliverability. So 2024 and Google policy updates, what are your proven ways to maintain deliverability and still be able to scale outreach as a reliable channel? Michael, let's start with you this time.
Sure. So right now there's just like a lot of talk of, we're kind of in this new and up and coming space of like email infrastructures, SMTP senders, and some people are thinking kind of Google and Microsoft are slowly trying to block boxes more, and they're kind of on to cold emailers as a whole. There is some truth to that, but ultimately what we have been seeing is people are diversifying through multiple email providers to almost like weed out and get real hard data on saying, is it the mailbox? Is it my copy? Like, what is it? And so that's kind of one thing that's been, I would say, fairly new over the last 6 to 9 months. As it relates to deliverability, specifically having very, very custom open lines of, either using AI or, we even see teams, by hand specifically looking up and writing out these one-liners, having that and then layering in Spintax, basically together is what we're seeing work extremely well across all kind of email infrastructures. Even in some cases where mailboxes and things are on blacklists, even having such amazing copy and personalization is really helping. And also like the best way to look at it is like, you don't want any, like if you look at a template, you don't want it to look like a template. Like, you have to almost think in layers of like, wow, can I get my Spintax to like, 10,000 plus different variations? And then once you have the Spintax, then you also want to layer in like your own legitimate hyper personalized text that can either be driven through AI enhancements through reply, or the kind of that handwritten kind of personal note.
And what would you use for the Spintax part of that?
Like for example, like reply has like instances of that, I believe, where basically there are ways of just kind of setting your template up to like have basic Spintax. We've also seen it where it's like you kind of take the template within reply and then basically jam it back into a GPT and say, give me more options. And then you review that. So we see the best templates kind of like the top part is hyper personalized. And then the bottom part is like the template is, if a normal template's like this, it's like this, like you want it to almost be unreadable when you kind of put it into your like template sequence. Because that'll ultimately spin it on top of having that customization.
I think there was a question in the chat just for simplicity, for people who aren't familiar. What is Spintax?
Yeah, so Spintax is essentially you take the cat jumped over the fence, and that's just your standard sentence. Within reply, you can basically put like curly brackets around it. And instead of saying fence, it could say chain link fence or wooden fence, or you can really just, even though it's in one kind of templated sentence, it's going to basically jumble it around, but it's going to basically say the same thing. So, with kind of your value props or, even we've even seen people use Spintax for changing up signatures to kind of variate it. So you can almost sometimes go like crazy over the top, which is like, if you are seeing deliverability issues, that's actually the number one thing that we look at to start. Like, I guess step one is we look at the infrastructure, but step two, we will look and say, does this truly look like a template? And if not, like we got to change it up. So if you're seeing your campaigns start at 50% open rates, but over the course of the month, just the open rates go to like 8%, you know, that might not always be, you know, your infrastructure or your mailbox. It actually could just be Google and Microsoft saying, hey, we fingerprinted this template. It looks the same. It's attached to the same domain and mailbox. And like we've literally seen a lot of use cases where they just layer in Spintax and it just goes right back up to 50% and everything's fine without changing anything, right? So yeah.
Great point. Let me get back the initial question here, and mic to Ashleigh.
Yeah, honestly, I'll say something that I resisted doing for far too long. When I finally started doing it and recommending it to my clients was a big help, was actually using inbox warmers. So actually signing up for a service like Mailreef, or all these other sort of services that will basically have this like low level where they'll send out emails for you to be basically artificially boosting the reputation of your inbox. Huge impact. I've deployed this with now. This is now when I'm going into clients and building sales systems from scratch. I'm telling them this, you are building in line items for this. You need this. Last year, it was not needed. This year, it absolutely is, unfortunately. I tell people a lot. It's kind of like you kind of have to game it like the credit system in the United States, in the sense of you just have you have terrible credit until you get some credit. These inbox warmers are a great way to do that reasonably cost effectively. Now, you need it more when you're starting out. When you've already got 50 sellers on the phones, you don't need it as much. So if you're at a big company, you don't need this. Your IT department's got it, hopefully. But if you're smaller, starting out, you're independent, you're on a smaller team, definitely worth investing the 20 to 50 bucks a month, or getting a service that has inboxes built in that have this for it. There's a lot of different, especially if you're going to be managing multiple inboxes. Like I have a client where I've got 5 inboxes going for one client. And then I've got other clients where it's just one inbox with this thing on it. So depending what you need, but that's now table stakes and it didn't used to be before. So that's a big thing for me.
Very much agree.
Thank you, Ashleigh. Thank you. And Callum, mic to you.
I don't think I have anything to add additionally to what these two have said. I was going to talk about warming. They've got it covered.
We have a few more questions in the chat. The one is, how does sending emails through a CRM like HubSpot affect deliverability? This is the one question. And another question was about the graphic. Give me a second. What are your thoughts on using graphics in the email?
I guess I can start on that. So, for example, if you fire out email through HubSpot, it's actually through their specific servers. So every email, when you send it, there are actually 2 IP addresses attached to it. One is on the server. So in that case, actually, when you fire out an email, it'll, if you send me an email from HubSpot, I'll be able to tell you it literally says HubSpot, like deep within the code through their IPs. There's also an IP on the domain level. So, ultimately you can check a blacklist and say, hey, my domain looks great. But if you fire an email out through HubSpot, it's very likely that that server IP will actually be on a blacklist. So you have to really uncover things. And actually, that's what we deal with at Mailreef. We actually replace the server level and manage it for you so that you can basically bring in your own domains, spin up mailboxes automatically. For example, you can spin up 100 mailboxes in no more than 15 minutes. Part of the reason I'm on this call today is we have a brand new integration with Reply. So ultimately, HubSpot, you're sharing IP reputation with everybody. So, if you send 100 emails and I send 100 emails, it's very likely it's coming from the same HubSpot server. So even though you're on different domains, you're sharing reputation. So, and sorry, what was the other question? I think it was related.
That was about using graphics in the email.
Sure. Yeah. So as much as you can avoid no graphics, not as many links. So you see,
at least to start.
To start, yes, exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. It's for example, an initial email. If you send a Loom video or even a YouTube video, you're going to see half the deliverability that you would.
I tell my clients no images, no links in the first email. Maybe in the second email include a link. No images until third or fourth, and that's once people hopefully are engaging. The one exception to that being if you've got a bomb GIF. Can work really well. And we all know what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a reaction GIF. I'm talking about like some product shot. I I recently started using an inbox management tool, and they got me off the GIF. Like literally, it was like, oh, that's really cool. I want that. You got something like that, that's different. But no, yeah, when you're including it, it is going to drop the reply rates. And I am curious too. I got a question for, because since we have the expert here, sending emails through HubSpot or Salesforce or whatever, is that different than sending through a tool like, depending on how it's set up, I know, Outreach, SalesLoft, stuff like that? Because I know with those, you can customize the server a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, there's this huge misconception in cold email that, for example, people, say, hey, what tool is better for deliverability, right? They'll say, hey, is reply better than X, Y, and Z, right? In reality, every single cold email tool in the entire world has no effect on deliverability when it's sent out. So comparing to a HubSpot, though, when they actually own the physical server that's firing out email, that's where they start to get into the world of like, hey, we own the server, we're affecting deliverability. So say you take for example, like, the sales lofts and like some of these higher enterprise tools of the world, where they say, hey, like hook up your custom infrastructure. That ultimately rolls up into some sort of like server infrastructure. So like that's where like Mailreef plays, for example. So for example, if you sync one mailbox that's Google to all 5 different tools, people might say, hey, one tool is better than another, but something to also remember is every single tool tracks opens slightly different. So you can actually never truly compare apples to apples between one sending tool and another. And so that's why a lot of times people kind of go down these rabbit holes of saying, hey, this is the best tool for deliverability, but in reality, it actually all rolls up to the email provider. If that's helpful, if that answers your question.
Ashleigh?
Took the words out. Yeah, love it. Yes.
Cool. Thank you so much. Well, any other thoughts on graphics, HubSpot, and stuff like that before we switch to the next question? Okay. Let's talk about actually personalization. What are your personal bulletproof methods to keep cold emails from sounding too automated? Let's start with Callum.
I think I said earlier, like, just try and make the reader feel like it was intentionally sent to them and as close to like them alone as possible. And I think that one of the ways that becomes a little bit simpler is by being very strict on focusing on quality rather than volume. And I think a lot of definitely a lot of the LinkedIn dialogue on emails and just, I think prospecting generally is just about how does this scale and how do we do it at a much larger level. And I think particularly if you're starting out and building these skills, focusing on a very niche single offer proposition to start with as you build up some knowledge is really, really important. I think that would be my view. Keep it simple, focus on quality, and make the buyer feel like you're talking to them and as close to them alone as possible.
Thank you, Ashleigh. Mike to you.
So there's a couple things here. I think one, I don't recommend that people hyper-personalize more than 10% of your emails. And when I say hyper-personalize, I mean custom writing more than half of it. Now, we were talking about writing good hooks and making sure that the first sentence is interesting. That's just kind of common sense. But what I recommend to my clients is the majority of your emails do what I call targeting. So it's not personalized, it's targeted. So I can send this email because it's well written to CIOs who CIOs in tech who are series B and C. That's going to be a list of maybe 1,000 people, but those 1,000 people I know really well. So I can make it look very personal to them, but I'm using it a lot. Right. So that's what I really recommend kind of doing. We talk about getting specific with like personas and it's not just CIOs, it's CIOs of this size companies in this industry. And then adjusting, okay, CIOs in bigger companies, they're going to get different messaging slightly, but it matters. And I will say too, ChatGPT, whatever you're using, can be great for helping you get initial copy and picking up on those nuances, asking it, how can I phrase this differently? What do you suggest? The big thing I recommend is edit what copy it gives you. Anyone who works in ChatGPT or these things can spot in 3 seconds if you didn't. And it's the sort of thing, once you start playing with it, you kind of, it's like seeing behind the curtain. It's like, oh, you wrote this using a bot and you didn't edit it properly. Yikes. And every industry is using this, so we have to be a little bit better. But 2, asking it to give you versions. Callum, you mentioned that earlier. That is like #1 tip, and then you can pull different versions in. But also, I use it more to help make sure that my thinking is straight. So making sure I've got like my different avatars, my different personas really well dialed in. And then that's how I can kind of keep things from sounding too automated, because this email could only go to 1,000 people. That's pretty personalized, but you consider there's 6 billion people on the planet. Or we have to 8 billion. I've lost track. We've got too many.
Yeah, that's a great point around AI. So, I guess we've been talking about AI a lot. It's great to leverage it. GPT is an amazing tool. GPT also came out with a tool that says, hey, in one line, we're going to give you a thumbs up or thumbs down to say, is it GPT or not? Basically, as a way to kind of control all this chaos that's going on kind of in this new implosion of AI. So, that's why we've seen a lot of success around, kind of everything that everybody said now, but around kind of using AI and just general concepts into just like parts of the email or just like specific variables. So, generally the way that we look at cold email is like, we've seen it in a couple of different ways work well. We've seen like really big emails work well when it's extremely like hyper personalized, and like to kind of what you mentioned before of the only to 1,000 people, where it's like as spot on as possible. If you are reaching out to a much broader audience, say your TAM is multiple millions of people and like you don't know where to kind of start, you pick one segment, but keeping it super short and straight to the point, but having some sort of hook where it's like, oh, wow, these people, one, not only know what they're doing, but it's like extremely relatable to me. And some easy ways to do that are almost saying like, we talked about case studies, but almost actually like referencing competitors and things like that, where it's just like, hey, we've done this for X, Y, and Z client, in a similar space. It really like adds a lot of value there. So.
Great points. Thank you so much. Basically, I need to mention that our expert team right now in the chat answering questions there. So please proceed asking them.
Sorry.
Yeah, what?
Sorry about that. I did see a quick comment on warming. Sorry about that.
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
Just a super quick background. So
Sure.
I actually created the world's largest email warming network about 3 years ago and sold that company to private equity. It's still one of the biggest in the world today. It's called Warm Up Inbox. It's a great solution. It's very popular now that people are saying like warming is hurting deliverability. I'll just leave it at the point of if that was true, the warm-ups, like basically every email and every warm-up network in the world would fall all at once. So instead of hearing kind of sprinklings of 1 or 2% of the world saying, hey, warming is impacting deliverability, or I got on a warming list, you would actually see 90-95% of the world getting hit with warming with that. So sorry for interrupting.
No, that's you know what, deliverability is really really the hottest topic in 2024, and I'd like to mention that later in September, we at Reply will hold a conference on email deliverability. So please stay tuned. We'll be definitely inviting all of you guys to again learn from the best, learn from the experts, and nail it down. Deliverability is the key, actually. Like deliverability content, all this stuff. Like it's super important to get those open rates and reply rates. But let's
one more thing just about HB's comment there. The other thing too, I think this is important to mention. Michael, Callum, myself, Olivia, we are all experts at what we do, and at the same time, that does not mean that everything that we say is right for you, right? So for every 100 people that use mailbox warming and it works, there's going to be one person it doesn't work for some various reason, or there's going to be other things in play. My tactics on personalizing versus targeting might not work for you because you have a very narrow audience you have to go after. So you have to personalize everything. Test everything we're saying. Take everything with a grain of salt. Test it for yourself. We do not have all the answers. We just have different answers, and you still need to go and test it for yourself. I think that's what makes prospecting fun. It's all about finding the right combination of tactics and tricks and just to build connections. And that's going to look slightly different at every company, with every salesperson, with every product.
Great points. Great points. Agree here. And I think we have time for just last question. Let me put it here. What one piece of advice you'd like to give to someone new in cold emailing? Ashleigh, let's start with you.
I think the biggest thing that I wish I had figured out earlier, and I work with people the most on to try and shift their mindset around, is nobody cares about what you want. So I work with people a lot on striking out phrases like "I'd like to meet" or "what I'd like to do." They don't know you. They do not care what you want or what you'd like to. Make it about them, why it's a good idea for them. You can suggest things for them, but explain why it's a good idea for them. Basically kind of that constant what's in it for them sort of thing. Always try and write from that perspective. I'm not saying never use first person and stuff like that, but just always try and come back to what's in it for them, not what's in it for you.
Michael?
Yeah. So, I mean, especially when you're starting out, you almost like reverse back into the math, right? So you say, wow, if I can get 1% of my industry, this company is going to be huge. And so I do see a lot of people very quickly they like try to work out the math. They say, okay, wow, like my total addressable market is 30 million people. I want to hit them in a year. So on month one, I got to send 1 million emails. But really, if you can get a blueprint of 1,000 contacts, then you can start to almost copy and paste that model across like a larger total addressable market. So start small, start super simple, go in cohorts of 100 to 300 contacts first. And I mean, you will see drastic changes between many tests and iterations. Just running one A/B test isn't always going to do it. So if you kind of find a good blueprint that wins across all that, you can scale up from there.
Great points. Callum, what do you think?
Yeah, mine's similar to that. We got these questions in advance, and I just wrote 3 words, which is less is more when you're starting out. I think the reality is that I think the temptation to suddenly say I'm going to spray a load of stuff out here and hope that something sticks, and maybe the speed to want to access that market can be difficult to resist, but make sure that you do. And you maybe hear from this call couple of experts on Michael's. Obviously, what was the numbers? How many emails are you sending a month? Like you built up to that. So, you presumably built up to that over a period of years, right? Like it's not that you need to just start at that level.
Yeah, a lot of people come to us and we'll say, hey, how long have you been doing cold email for? They'll say, hey, we've been doing it about 2 months, and they'll say, hey, we want to send like about 1 million cold emails a day, and we're like, that math doesn't always like work out. So when our system's sending over 100 million emails a month now, we actually force all of our clients to start small, find a blueprint. There are ways of really scaling out cold email in a very large way, but you actually, as a potential client, almost have to show us, and we kind of come back to you and say, hey, here's the proper way to do it. But there are some nuances to it. But if you can get it to work on one Google mailbox, then there is a way to scale up, but start small and then kind of go from there.
Great points. Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael, Callum, Ashleigh. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all your thoughts and insights on such hot topics.